I've been having fun with bicycles in the last year or two. I built this cargo bike, which I actually have YouTube video on, and it's been a popular video, and the bike's been a big hit. Works really well. And then one afternoon, I built this upside down bike, which took about 2 hours. And originally, it was impossible almost to ride. Only the big people could ride it because the rake of the front forks was too much. Once I fixed that, the kids ride it now, or the bigger kids. And then I built the tandem, the 16-inch tandem, and it's been a huge hit with the little girls because they can both jump on it and just take off. I have a little problem with the chain keeps jumping off, but they get it back on in a second. So this has been a big one, and I filmed it with my new camera, and I had so much of the footage screwed up that I just didn't even try to put it together and post it. So, but now I'm gonna start a new one. I'm gonna try to video it. This is a Huffy Deluxe. I found it in a trash pile that had been run over by a car apparently, and the back end was all crunched up. So I cut the back end into little pieces where I could straighten each piece individually, welded it back up, put some new tires on it, and it really rides really well. It's like a beach cruiser. But the kids never ride it. This is one bike that just sits, doesn't get ridden. So I'm gonna start the process of changing this bike into a side-by-side. Never done this before. I have to put two seats side by side. I have to put two handlebars side by side. One will be fixed and one will be operational. And then the hard part will be to make a full set of cranks on each side. So this will be an interesting project. I'm gonna start out doing the seat. I think that's gonna be the simplest part. This is my bicycle parts bucket. These are little odds and ends left over from my previous bicycle work. I haven't thrown it away because these parts can be very handy, and I never throw anything away. Should work. So this was a headset. It's the part that went in here on another bike, but it's the right size tube to fit in here. Get this off. There's a seat post. So I'm gonna make this the new seat post. And I'm gonna cut this part off and weld something like yoke.
So the holder for the other seat post was a different diameter. I didn't really have a pipe that fit. This is a bigger pipe. So I cut a big notch out of it to be able to kind of bend it down to fit tighter on the seat post. I'm gonna weld it, and I'll have to put some sort of double clamps on it to get it to really hold that seat post tight. All of my connections are kind of loose right now. It's kind of frustrating. This is not going to work. I have to slide it in there before I weld it. Luckily, I just have a little tack on it. I have to take this off. Put it on there and then weld it. Okay, phase one, the seats, is done. Well, pretty much done. Not quite done. Had trouble making things get tight enough so they wouldn't move. Now this seat tube is a weird size, so I just had to get a piece of steel pipe and I split it down the middle and welded a nut and a big nut, and I can tighten this up real well, no problem. The other seat has the original seat tube, or a seat tube that fit off another bike, but I did the same thing. I welded nuts and bolts. Well, I didn't weld the bolts. I welded a nut and a big nut, and I can pull it up real tight, and I added one at the bottom and split it. So this is real sturdy. I had a heck of a time getting it not to move in the seat tube, and it's weird because it fit well, but it just wouldn't grab. I tried putting a set screw on the side, and what I ended up doing was throwing away that seat skewer, that little cam lock thing, and just putting a bolt in there so I could tighten the bejeebies out of it. And I'm not above welding all this stuff in place, but I don't really know where to put it, so I'm hesitant to weld it now until I put a couple of bolts on it and ride it. But seats, good. Steering, a little more complicated. Starting that now. We got the original handlebars off, and this wedge was some kind of stuck. It took me forever to get it off. It was rusted in. Come to think of it, the last time I took a bike apart, the wedge was stuck like really bad. So I'm going to use this headset, and I was kind of hoping to use this, but this is aluminum, so I'm going to cut this off and weld a lever up here to connect the active handlebars to the front forks. So this is a cast aluminum. I can't do much with it, but I can cut this off, and this is steel, and I'll put a lever on it. So let me chop this off. Okay, so I cut off the aluminum original deal, which just was a force fit, and I welded this little, I guess you call it, I don't know, pitman on. It's way too long, but that's okay for now. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it back in the bike and snug it up. I'm sure it'll have to come out once or twice before we're done, but I can go ahead and put it in the bike for now. Okay, handlebars. They need to be strong. That shouldn't be a problem. This one is going to be over here, and it's going to be fixed. It's not going to swivel. This one is the one that's going to steer, so it's going to pivot this thing. And they need to be in the right place so the bike is comfortable. That may be the trickiest part of all. So it's kind of confusing. I think I'll mount the handlebars to some sort of horizontal bracket and then try to get the bracket in the right place on the bike, and then hook up the linkage between here and here. The dummy handlebar, I have a simple weld on the end of this spreader pipe. The active handlebar, I'm going to braze this nut onto the end, and this is going to be the nut's going to be the bearing. I had to braze it because it's stainless steel nut and it won't weld right, but I can braze it on there pretty good. I'll get it tacked on both sides and I'll unscrew the shaft all the way out, I think, and we'll braze her up with the TIG machine.
So actually I switched from a braze to a weld. I'm using stainless steel rods. It's real tricky. Stainless steel threaded rods are a pain. They always want to gall up, so I'm being real careful to get a good weld on here, a good strong weld on as much as I can, and not mess up the threads. That's my goal. But it didn't work. The threads ended up locking up like I was scared they would. So I fought with it for a little while thinking I could work it loose, but I couldn't do it. So I ended up cutting this off and going a different route with a centered steel bushings that I happen to have. Really weird things. They look like steel, but they're really made out of millions of little pieces of steel BBs that are squashed together, and they're impregnated with grease. So it's hard to get a good weld, because when you start welding on them, the grease boils out. But I think I've got it. I think I've got a good weld for the strength. This is not a weight bearing structure so much as it is just a good pivot for the handlebars. It's not like the seat post.
Okay, so this 1.5-inch square tube is the same width as the head tube or the fork tube on the bike. And I got it centered and I got it perpendicular to this. So I've got two of these cut the same. I'm going to weld them to the horizontal, not to the square tube. The square tube will go away. And when I flip it over, it should fit on the bicycle without too much struggle. And I'll weld this and this to the side of the blue head tube, and then I'll put 2 more braces on it somehow, some way, and that should make it fairly strong. All right, this is gonna work. I can kind of sit on the seat. I got the bike clamped to that vertical, and the proportions seem pretty good as far as how far away the handlebar is from the seat. So I'm gonna grind some blue paint and make this weld, and then I'm either gonna come with 2 more out here, or I'm gonna come with 1, maybe just 1 right here to give it some more strength. And then we just have to do the handlebar with the linkage to do the steering. This will be rigid. None of this will move.
I have lots of pipe, heavy wall pipe, lots of water pipe. Heavy wall pipe like that orange pipe that's holding up the seats. That thing's probably scheduled 40. But I don't have much lightweight tubing, so I'm making use of these old bicycles to grab any little piece I can. Try to keep this thing from being 1,000,000 pounds. I do not have the ability to run a bead on this super thin wall tubing without burning a hole in it. Probably some people do. And it's not like the TIG where you have constant control over the amperage with the foot pedal. Once you set it, it's the same temperature. And if you try to run a bead, it just gets hotter and hotter until it burns through, or at least for me. So what I have to do is make a lot of overlapping little spot welds, and the net result is the same. All
right, I'm gonna have to call it for the day, but I'm getting close. I got this brace and these two braces, which makes this crossbar really strong. I added another bushing. Quit shaking here. Added another bushing down here, and another brace, to keep the this is the operable handlebars really strong. And I had them fitting good, and when I welded it, kind of got in a bind, so I ended up cutting it again and tapping it around with the hammer until it turns really easy, and then welding it like one little BB at a time to keep it from moving. I need to clean all these welds up. So I'm getting close with the steering. What I need to do is attach something like this to this part so it can turn this part just parallel, and something to keep this from coming out, a stop collar or something. I'm not sure, maybe just a cotter pin. And, I'll cut these handlebars a little bit shorter. I've cut these already. And then the fun part, making a double crankset. Yeah, this has got a few hours on this little bike here.
So this was, I thought, an innovative way to keep the handlebars from rising. As it turns out, it was just a total waste of time, because when I put the Pitman arm thing on it above that, it does the same thing. This is a Harbor Freight vise, and it is a real piece of junk. The jaws don't close parallel, and it just seems like no matter how hard you pull on the handles, it just doesn't hold. I have another good vise. It's outside in the rain, but the base doesn't swivel, and I use the swivel all the time. So maybe one day I'll put a swivel on the bottom of my other good vise, and we'll use this as an anchor and throw it in the river somewhere. So I'm welding a steel, I'm calling it a Pitman arm, but that may not be the right term, to the stainless steel tubing. This tubing fits around the shaft coming from the operable handlebars. And so I'm going back with TIG because I'm dealing with two different types of metals. When I welded the Pitman arm thing onto the stainless steel tubing, I put a lump on the inside of the tubing, so now the handlebar pipe won't fit through it like it did originally, so I had to play with it for a while. I took it off, I did the pencil grinder, and I did a file up in there, and I just struggled with it for a little while, but I finally got the inside diameter of the stainless steel tube all cleaned out, and then it went together. So now with everything assembled and the Pitman arm at 90 degrees out from the front of the handlebars, I drilled through the stainless steel. Well, I had already drilled through the stainless steel in the vise. I drilled through that hole and through the solid interior axle, for better, I don't know what you call it. And I put a through bolt anyway. So now the handlebars are connected to the stainless steel tube that holds the Pitman arm, so nothing can move and everything's copacetic.
Okay, we have steerage kind of through up here almost. I need to cut these green handlebars at maybe 2 inches shorter. I need some rubber grips. I put a temporary tie rod thing. I got some swivel joints ordered, but it steers It's pretty solid. I might tell you what, I got a little play right here in these bolts. I may drill them out and put a 1/4-inch bolt, or when I'm satisfied that everything's working, I may just take them out and weld this, plug weld it. If I do weld it, I can't take it apart anymore. Maybe we'll just go with a bigger bolt, take up some of that slack. But other than that, let's give it a test ride. Alright, so this is a little tricky. I need to come back this way and have a pedal about here, and I can screw this into here. I can add onto this steel, but I need to attach it here, but I still want this pedal to spin, because I can remember when I was a kid having bikes with no pedals. It's no fun. Your feet roll off the tube. So I'm gonna take one of these pedals apart. I got some extra pedals, and see what the bearings inside look like. It would be nice if I could weld onto the end of the shaft and still keep the bearing. Let's see what we can do. Yeah, so this is what I was scared of. The inside of these pedals, and I'm sure they're all about the same, is so small. Even if I could cut this plastic away and have the end of the shaft sticking out, it's not enough metal to weld to and have that, what, 12-inch long crank be secure. So I'm gonna have to do something totally different. Probably got to remove those original pedals and probably make some sort of pedal. Okay, progress so far. The pedals that came with the baby blue bike were the cheapest of my 3 sets, so I'm sacrificing them. And they were riveted together with no bearings. They had plastic bushing, so they were kind of junk anyway. So I couldn't get the shaft out, so I just had to cut it. And then the shaft came out, and these were together like this. So these threads fit the cranks. Now I need to extend this out, and it needs to be strong. So what I'm going to try to do is weld this 5/8 pipe, 5/8-inch tubes here, and I have this stainless tube that I'm going to use for the bearing of the pedal, and I'm hopefully with a little grease it'll be acceptable. I mean, it won't be a racing bike, and nothing I do is permanent, so I can always redo it. The trick will be to weld this on here and have it straight and not all woppy jawed. But let's give it a try.
So with the crank in the vise and the pedal stub threaded into the crank, I got the bar tacked weld on there, and I'm using this to minimize the woppiness. I've been going back and forth and tapping it back and forth with the hammer, and now I'm ready to weld.
So cut the donor crank set. I don't need that part, but I need this part because it has the thread to fit the pedals. And one's right hand and one's left hand. Now I'm going to put this in here and put a little weld on it, and then I have to fit this to my new 3/4 shaft, and it's got to go out like that. And that's got to be pretty strong weld, because you know people step on these pedals. Now this spins pretty decently, but it gets stuck over here against the weld, so I got to do something before I weld this on there, because I won't be able to do it. I won't be able to get it off after that. All right, to update, this is where we are. This little piece right here is from the original crappy pedal that I cut in half, and I welded a 5/8 shaft to it, and on the shaft I slid I had a bushing, I cut it in half, put one on each side, and a piece of stainless steel tubing, just because it's what I had that fit. So it'll be metal on metal, it won't be a bearing. That's a little disappointing. Now this is the pedal and crank from the donor bike, And I have the measurement off the floor here is the same as the other side. So all I have to do is cut this to fit the 5/8 shaft, get everything straight, get this vertical because the opposite side is vertical, and weld it. I think we should be good to go, and then I'll do the other side, same thing. Put together a pair of pedals for the inside, which no longer has pedals, and that's not fun to pedal on. And just simple as it can be, it's 2 blocks of wood and 2 pieces of old scrap fiberglass, and I just built them around this stainless tube so I know they're the right size. So I'm gonna take them apart and put them on the bike and epoxy them in place. And if they turn on the tube, no problem, but the tube is probably going to turn on the inner tube because it turns real easy. This is kind of a friction fit, but either way, this would be better than using your bare feet on that stainless bike. So on the steering, I replaced this temporary flat bar with these fancy little fittings from McMaster Car. They swivel, but they have, for all practical purposes, no play whatsoever. So that took all the play out of the steering. It's a big improvement, and these things are cheap, like $5 or $6 a piece. So I couldn't keep this from pivoting, so I drilled and put 2 screws through that bracket, and that solved that. And I couldn't keep this from spinning, so I took this set screw and drilled it all the way, and it's all the way into the post now, so that's not moving. So I finally talked my bicycle test dummy, I talked my bride into taking a ride on the side-by-side. She was whining so much about everything and saying the pedals felt funny that I wasn't really listening to her. But they did feel funny because they were, in fact, something was breaking. It's all cattywampus, and about that time, my side did the same thing. My side broke all the way off. So I was relying on the threads here with the old pedal stub, and then that kept turning, so I drilled it and put a split pin in there. And I guess when I did that, I made it weak enough to totally, yeah, it just broke off. So I'm not gonna worry about saving the threads anymore. I'm just gonna get it on there where it needs to be, and I'm gonna weld the bejeebies out of it. And if I ever have to take it apart, I will just have to cut these cranks in half and get a new set. Okay, I've got both sides welded. They're not cleaned up, but they're welded. And I put a little gusset in there to kind of add some strength. And they're kind of, I don't know if you can tell, but they're kind of halfway straight. They're not too wop. So we'll bring them home and see if I can get my wife to volunteer for another ride. See if this will work.
So starting is the only kind of tricky part, and once you do it once or twice, it's no problem. But when you have 2 type A personalities on the bike, it's kind of problematic because the guy on the right has no control, and it just goes against, you know, everything you've been doing on a bicycle for your whole life. You want to get on there and steer, and if you're on the right side, you can't steer. You just gotta relax and go with it. So it didn't work with the 2 guys so well, but with the husband-wife teams, it worked. Like, it's awesome. It's fun. It's a good cruising bike.
Both feet off.
You got me?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, don't have it. Okay, ready?
Okay.
When I say 3, just start pedaling. Okay.
Oh.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, just relax.
Yep, just pedal. And don't look down.
Merry Christmas!